Welcome, reprobate. You're listening to the Smith House Adventure Show. Hello, thanks for watching and welcome to the show. Today I have Ty Doolittle, a retired U.S. Marine combat veteran and was a member of the counter-gang unit with the Vancouver Police Department in British Columbia. After retiring from policing, Tyler co-founded Serving First Responders, which is dedicated to helping those who have served their communities. Thank you and welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I just want to clarify, I didn't retire from the Marine Corps. I did 9 years and then I got out. So I didn't do that.
Always a Marine. Yeah, I was kind of wondering with that thing there. I'm like, some say they retired, some say they've never retired. So
no,
once and always.
Yeah, I served 9 years in uniform. I was in from 89 to 1998. Then I got out and started policing in 2002.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So what inspired you to join the Marines? Was it always the Marines, or were there any other branches of the United States services that you kind of had your eye on as maybe a second?
That's a good question. I think it's kind of a funny story. So I when I was in high school, I knew I didn't want to go to college. I was just like, yeah, I don't think that's my thing. And I had a friend he had signed up for the Air Force, and he said, why don't you come down and talk to the Air Force recruiter? And I was like, okay. Then we walked into the recruiting office, and the recruiting offices in the U.S., usually they got all branches of the service: Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard. Not always Coast Guard, because they're quasi-military. During war times, they're under the Department of Defense. During peacetime, I think they're under the Department of Transportation. If I got it wrong, I apologize. But when I went in there, the recruiting center had started off. You walked in, the Air Force was the first office, then it was the Army, then the Navy, and then the Marines were at the back office. And so the Air Force guy no-showed us. He wasn't there. And then the Army guy was trying to think. I don't think the Army guy was there either. The Navy recruiter was, I don't know how to put this bluntly or nicely, but I'll be blunt. He was not, he didn't represent the uniform. He was wearing a medium where he should have been wearing a large, and just didn't really represent. I didn't feel as a high school kid coming in, he just didn't represent. And I was like, I guess this is not going to happen today. And I remember I went to go use the bathroom, which is way in the back. And so took a leak, come back. And as I'm walking past the Marine office, the Marine recruiter, dude had it going on. Gunny duck. He had fruit salad of ribbons up to here, body built like an Adonis. And he saw that I stopped. He's like, what are you looking to do? Not like, hey, what can I do? What are you looking to do? What do you want to do? And he really challenged me. He's like, do you want it easy? Because if you want it easy, just go on up there, leave your name for the Air Force. I'm not looking for people who want easy. And I was like, but I want easy, but you look better than the other guys. So eventually I kind of wandered in and started talking with him. And he had just said, he goes, if you want the Marines, it's going to be tough. You're going to have to work. But the other side that really sold me is, he goes, you get to shoot other people's guns or wear other people's clothes and drive other people's vehicles. And I'm like, that's kind of cool. And he said, and just so you know, this uniform has magic. And I'm like, okay, I'll bite. He goes, you put on this uniform, women come running. He said it in a few other not quite so politically correct terms, but I was like, okay, so I get to wear a uniform, carry, shoot guns and get women. I'm like, yeah, this is, every 18-year-old's dream. Actually, I was even 17 at the time. I was like, this sounds great. And that was kind of what hooked me into the Marine Corps. So I went home, talked to my dad about it, and my dad was all on board. He's like, yeah. And originally I was going to join the reserves. And he goes, well, why are you joining the reserves? I said, well, I don't know. And he goes, if you're going to do it, do it. I says, all right. So I went active duty. And so I graduated in June of 89. And by September of 89, I was off to boot camp, standing on the yellow footprints in San Diego.
That's crazy. Yeah, there is a very different mentality with the Marines. You can look at other people's posts online and, whatever, but Marines, it's either doing crazy fitness stuff, psycho things that you're like, oh yeah, somebody's going to get hurt and that video better get deleted so somebody can get a nice pension later on when they retire. And just that crazy attitude of going down some of the history and stuff of Marines and different things with D-Day coming up and just kind of expanding even within the Pacific. And I mean, you give Marines a chance to go at the enemy and you just give them a variety of stuff that they can kind of piecemeal together like Lego. And, you know, there was, a couple Marines that they took the guns off of an Air Force plane because those guns shot at a higher rate. So they rigged them all up to kind of do that. And then when the enemy came to try and storm them, they just let them know what was going on.
You know, logically, it makes no sense to join the Marine Corps versus the other services. They're exposed to way more danger. They have the smallest budget. Mm-hmm. It's usually the toughest training, with the exception of, different special forces. But, as far as just regular boot camp, toughest training, all these things. But I think what brings Marines together, Brian, is the shared suffering, mm-hmm. right? We get to talk about how shitty we had it. But we had it way shittier than these guys. And it's you almost wear the suffering as a badge of honor. But yeah, like logistically, you think, okay, well, why would I go to where, you've got the smallest budget, the smallest branch, you have to do kind of the crappiest jobs. What makes sense about that? But it gives you a little bit of that swagger.
Well, exactly. And I think there's just a different mentality of every Marine is a rifleman. Doesn't matter if you're cook, this, that, whatever, or pilot. You have to know how to be a rifleman first at the core and shooting. And I think that does a very different kind of mindset as opposed to somebody that joins the Army. And, well, I'm a cook, and that's what I am in the Army. Whereas Marines, it's, no, you're a rifleman first, and you've learned something else second. And I think that does do something with that whole, you can look at anybody and be like, okay, yeah, they're a rear echelon, but push comes to shove, I can at least tell them where to shoot properly and do stuff like that. And they're going to be able to know what's going on, as opposed to somebody that goes, whoa, the gate's being breached now? Okay, I got cutlery. What do I do? Right. So I think there's that different mentality of it. And that marksmanship was always a huge thing, reading into stuff like that of, everything. So I think there's many factors that just make, and I think also with, them not being their own thing, that they're under the Navy. So there's that other thing too, where they're constantly trying to fight to show that, we are our own thing. They just help get us there, but we've got our own Air Force. We've got our own everything, stuff like that. I know with the future, they're looking at changing how the Marine Corps is structured for more of hit and run tactics if anything happens with a World War III scenario or other major conflicts.
They do. The average Marine does more than, say, the average soldier or the average airman, from my experience. And I'm not saying this is 100%, but I was a mechanic. That was my job, was to be a diesel mechanic. Yet I saw quite a bit of combat when I was in. It's just. And it differs. It just all depends on what unit you're with and how they're tasked. But the Marine Corps, we did a lot more of that type of training. Now, the last thing I wanted to do was be infantry. I didn't want to be infantry, I'll tell you that. And my only thinking was I wanted to have something that would help me once I got out of the Marine Corps. And, I talked to guys who were infantry, or for those who don't know, grunts, we call them grunts. And you ask them, well, what did the Marine Corps train you to do? And they said, well, I can be really good at camping or being homeless. Like I could destroy that. There's not a problem. And I just wanted to have something a little different. I mean, I was a mechanic for a little bit when I first got out, but I never really did. I realized I'm not good at it, nor do I like it. So yeah, for the most part, every Marine has a higher level of training for infantry tactics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I know some countries are trying to put more of their purple trades, so to say, or whatever like that. Get them more kind of in that. I know Canada was trying to do that as well with I don't know if it's still there, but the soldier qualification. So even if you were a cook, mechanic, or whatever, right after your basic, you went on that course. And it was kind of the introduction to some of the infantry tactics and learning some of the weapons, stuff like that, in case you ever do get thrown behind a machine gun. You've at least, okay, I remember this. It might be, a little rusty, but there's still like that. I don't know if that's still in it, but there was the SQ course in between your trades course.
Yeah, and this is a bit of correlation between that and policing too. even the most senior detectives in the department that I was with, you still have to go and qualify every year. You take active shooter training, you take all those things because everybody starts off as a patrolman, going out and taking patrol calls. Now some stay in patrol and become very, very good at it. Others just do a little bit of time there and they wind up going to a specialty section and become very good at those specialty sections. But every cop still has to qualify with their handgun. They still have to do what they need to do.
Yeah. So when you first got into the Marines, what was an early part of your career that was really tested you and you realized like, okay, the Marines aren't playing around. Like there's a standard, I thought, but okay, here it is. Where did you kind of get that little bit of your first wake up to this is the Marine Corps?
So I went to boot camp on September 25th, 1989. So, when I look back in comparison, my first wake up was September 25th, 1989. You get there and those drill instructors with their smoky hats on, they come on that bus and they start ripping into you. And it is no joke, man. And it's like 36 hours. It doesn't matter how well you do what they tell you to do, you're not doing it right. And you're just, it's almost like it's geared to confuse you, to get you off your game, to destroy any confidence so that they can break you down to everybody's at the bare basic level. And then they build your confidence back up. But it started day one. Boot camp was like, this ain't no joke. There is no getting some rest. I slept solid while I was in boot camp, but I was never rested. I slept solid more out of exhaustion, not out of, proactive sleep health. It was like you sleep when you can. Yeah.
No, and exactly. Like you do sleep, you wake up and there's like, did I even sleep? Everything still hurts. I still heard the yelling in my dreams. What's going on?
One of the funniest things, and I'm convinced that every Marine, when they first enter boot camp, is considered to be stone deaf because you've been up for 24 to 36 hours and they take you for hearing testing and they put you in this soundproof booth with these little headphones on and it's instant. You're out sleeping. Right. And so, I remember for me, it was, this is 35 years ago. Joe started banging on the door, yelling at me to wake up because I was just out. There was no yelling. There was nobody right in your face. And, okay, yeah. So, you kind of try to work on your rhythm. Anybody who's ever done one of those hearing tests where you're in a soundproof booth and press the plunger when you hear the sound. So I just like press 1, 2, 3, 4, press 1, 2, 3. It just kept nodding off. So I'm surprised that all Marines aren't deaf, or at least reported to be stone deaf when they come out of boot camp, because that's no joke.
No, but again, it's that, and they're probably very different. Back then, shark swarming and doing everything else, it just in your face, get up, get down, get up, get down. One's yelling at one command, and you don't know what you're doing. Everything's confusing. But I think there was an important thing maybe back in the training before that I'm hearing it isn't kind of the same now, where those stressors and things like, no phone, there was no phone when I went through and stuff like that. So everything was those people around you, these complete strangers that are going to become, for some people, your lifelong friends that, you won't talk to all the time. That's the military. But then once you get back to talking to them, you're like, it never went away and stuff like that. And those certain things that you really build the bond that happens. And I've heard some people say with phones now and everyone be able to kind of get those little messages from home. It's kind of taken a little bit out of what it was with that building and stuff.
Now that I'm a little bit older, I'm going to be 53 here in a couple months. You look back on it, everybody likes to say, man, nobody had it harder than us and nobody had it harder than us. And, I think as the military evolves through time, you just have different hearts. You have different difficulties. Like guys in World War II, to tell them that, you know what, you're not going to get a phone call for 3 months on a ship. We couldn't even fathom that now, to be taking a boat over to combat and it's 6 months there and no contact. But there, it's the norm. So it's the era that you serve in, you have your heart. you have your difficult. And as that era evolves, the hardest thing you face evolves as well. You can say, oh yeah, we had it harder, but you know what? Like, I know your generation versus my generation, the technology that you have. My son's he's in the Army National Guard, and I look at some of the technology that they use just in training, and it blows my mind. I'm like, okay, well, why wouldn't you have cellular technology? The whole world is running on it. Why would we not incorporate that into our standard issue? Everybody says, well, I qualified on iron sights, and nobody's got it tougher than me. Okay, but if you have optics that are there that allow you to shoot better and more accurately and more efficiently, well, the pride is bullshit. Like, you're not there to say I had a tough issue. You're there to win wars. So you do whatever it is that's going to allow you to evolve to win wars. Just as our enemy evolves, we should be evolving as well. So, when we talk about this new generation, everybody likes to say, oh man, these new guys, they don't have it as tough as we did. Okay, but you know what? They also have to worry about a lot more stuff on the go than we did. The same as I look at what I was responsible for as a corporal and a sergeant versus say like Vietnam era guys, right? What they're responsible for, and it's just different. It's an evolution of suckiness that happens. I always like to say, oh man, we had a tough, we had iron sights, we had this, we had that, but really it evolves. Your challenges evolves, the suckiness evolves. Also, your victories will evolve as well. I don't mean to go off on a rant or a tangent, but of course. It's real easy. It's real easy for those of us who've been through it, and it is, it's more like when you're in the mess and, having a few drinks, you like to brag about how tough we had it. But I couldn't imagine taking the kit that I was issued and, the training that I received and put that into today's military. It's outdated. You wouldn't survive. Same way as even you take a guy who's in World War II or World War I, who's shooting like an M1 Garand, and tell them, oh yeah, you're going to have to take out snipers in the middle of Afghanistan. No, like it's not going to work.
Yeah. And I think there's always the change in the generations and the finding, that way that they did it was old, antiquated, and didn't work. And, we try different things. And there's always, I think, the blend of taking some of the new, but keeping that hard of the old.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because without, some basics and some trainings now, you can't really yell at the troops and this and that goes on. And those stressors and those things that you have to go through, they create a little bit of a resilience in you for when times get hard. Because I think what a lot of civilians and the bureaucrats in it, that the armed forces has one job, and that is to train to kill other people when peace negotiations and diplomatic things just fail. And you have to prepare that, every generation of potential warriors that are going to go into major combat or a world war, to make sure that they have those skills and those things that when everything is at its absolute worst and the morale is low and everything that there is that core belief built within you and within your unit, and that you can overcome anything. Yeah. And I mean, you see some of it now where the military and the bureaucracy, they're kind of fighting over, no, they need war fighting training. You can give them other stuff as well. You don't have to have, barbaric warriors like the old days, running through when they're not in battle, wrecking the city. But and it's, again, I mean, I'm way out of my league talking about how the high stuff there, but, keeping the training as realistic as hard as possible while still, the old days of maybe some of the hazing and some of the name calling and certain little things where they might beast you on PT till you feel like you're dying. Some of those people maybe went away, got too extreme with it, but you still need some of that extremeness to prepare those, especially frontline soldiers, who are going to be dealing with some of the worst stuff, and making sure that like PTSD and those other things don't happen because they weren't kind of put through the paces early on when they were developing their warrior skills.
Yeah, you have to blend that old school fortitude with new school innovation. Right, bringing those together. It's there's a saying that says hard times create strong men, and strong men create good times create soft men, and soft men create hard times. And it can be cyclical. And so, as a military, you have to be able to hold on to that old school fortitude, so that you're still creating good men and, better times, but you're not creating soft, weak men and hard times. There'll be a bit of ebb and flow, but, we have to be able to blend those two together.
Yeah. And I think that's always the difficulty between the two, especially where you have a bureaucracy or people, politicians, that they have no idea. Like, there used to be an era where almost every, major politician or something like that, they had military service. So, when they were doing the budgets and the different things and the procurement kind of stuff with all the committees, they had an idea at least of, okay, I remember as a troop, this was needed. Okay. Where I think nowadays it's more of just either this is shiny and fancy. Well, does it really have a use for troops? No, but it's shiny and fancy and it works for my riding district,
My constituents think that we should have it.
Exactly. And then the money gets wasted on technology. You're like, why did we go this route? We need buggies or this or that. We're going to a new thing, but no, we need heavy tanks and all these things. You're going, but we're not in that mindset anymore. We have to evolve. And there's always that fight you see with high-ranking military people at those committees, and they're going, we need this. And then them being told, why do you need it?
I'd be curious to, just because I, obviously not living in Canada, but, being very connected to it, who was the last prime minister that served in the military?
I see that is a very different, honestly, I think you're going to have to go back about 20 or 30 different prime ministers till maybe some of the start.
Yeah.
Whereas when you saw like American presidents and senators and Congress people and stuff like that, that was almost the thing of, if you want to get into that, especially in the old days, you had
the last president to serve in uniform was George Bush Jr. Yep. He was, and there's always that iconic where he landed the jet on the carrier. But you look at some of the strongest presidents that we've had, whether you agree with them or disagree with them. You look at like an Eisenhower, right? Obviously, just phenomenal military mind. Look at John F. Kennedy, right? The PT Boat 109. Like, that guy's got some stones to get through what he did, right? That type of thing. There are some incredible leaders that come out of the military, and I think it allows them to have a little more understanding on the gravity of the decisions you make as a commander in chief. Mm-hmm. When you know that this affects somebody else, it's not just, you have the privilege, you have the power. And, if you, I'm not saying everybody has to, but I think if you've served in uniform, you understand the privilege that comes with the power. And, you got to look at it a little different.
Well, exactly. And, you see some of the ones who've never served and they're so war hawkish to get it out there and stuff like that. But they haven't had that buddy who they've held while died, or had to go find the remains or do a repatriation ceremony and, visit the grave sites and stuff like that of those that you laughed with and then you've now lost.
One of the greatest, one of the biggest voices that's against the militarization is Tulsi Gabbard, she's a former congresswoman out of Hawaii and a Democrat, or was a Democrat, but she served almost 20 years, and she's very much against the big war machine, because she says, I've seen what it does. And, having been somebody who serves in uniform, still serving in the reserves, it's, war can be a big business. And if you're in it for the wrong reasons, the wrong people will suffer.
Well, and exactly. And with, if you ever read any of the history books and you read letters from officers back in the day, and it was almost the same thing, they complained about the politicians, that it seemed to be a military industrial complex. They didn't always use those words back in the day, but, they felt that the stuff, and it is true, war makes money, especially if you can kind of play both sides of a conflict. And, it's unfortunate that, again, ones that were lawyers or people that really, it's a different mindset and stuff like that. And you do see it within the politics of those who have served and those who are more academic in life. And, it is unfortunate at times that, people that have no clue really what they're talking about, when you hear them in sessions and, they're talking to, the witnesses or whatever, and grilling these military people, the questions that they ask, you're like, you don't even really know what you're talking about. You're on this committee, but it's all
I
just
think
academic.
I think our leaders need to have that balance. You know, if everybody around the country was straight out of the military, you know, we would definitely have a different world. And I don't think that is a good idea either. I think you need to have that blend because, you know, business still has to work. Like you don't just sign a requisition form and all of a sudden you have a military. Like there's a lot of things that go into it. And if you have a better understanding of the civilian side of equipping a country, whether it's with the military or social services or you know, all the infrastructure, it's better to have a broader understanding, you know, and not to get too political because you know, I'm not a political guy. I just have, you know, I do have certain views.
Mm-hmm. Oh, exactly. And it's just the thing of, there's always that thing where everything seems to go crazy. And then that one person gets in and you're like, okay, here's some vision. Here's a pathway to go through. But that's like that with politics. And it's always kind of the problem with Western politics is because we are democracies and we have a lot of opinions to get heard. It is a very kind of, you know, turning that military machine around and stuff like that to get it ready for the next future conflict and, you know, turn away from the old thought process. You know, it is a slow thing but again, it's with those checks and balances that you make sure sometimes a lot more opinions get heard of as opposed to, you know, more dictator countries where, yeah, they can make military things happen like that. But sometimes, again, it's not always the best because you haven't heard those other people go, well, how are we going to supply these troops if we do all this? Or it's nice to have 20,000 tanks. What about the mechanics and the fuel and stuff like that? So yeah, there is always that give and take between the two. Just to get out of the kind of more politic way, what was the one time in your entire Marine Corps career where you were tested? That was the gauntlet you went through. And what did you do to overcome that?
Well, to say there was one time, yeah, I wish.
The major one that if you were that comes back that you think of every now and then, and it kind of made you who you are with that challenge.
You know, I not to sound cliche, but going to combat. When I deployed to Mogadishu in December of '92, I'd been a corporal for 3 months, and all of a sudden, I was part of a platoon that had a staff sergeant, a sergeant, me, and 11 troops. So that was us, and you know, all of a sudden now I'm not just responsible for me, or I'm not just responsible for driving a truck or fixing a truck. Now I'm responsible for 11 guys as basically the de facto platoon sergeant. Now I'm worried about these other guys, and each one of them have different strengths and challenges. Each one of them have different backgrounds, different family life, all those things, and to take all of that into account. To be able to work within just ourselves, but then also we were tasked out to support other units. So, okay, now how do I work that in? How do I make sure that what we're doing is what the sergeant and staff sergeant are you know, what they're required? You know, everybody thinks, oh yeah, once you're a platoon sergeant, it's great. No, you serve two masters at that point. You look out for your troops, but you also have to serve up the chain of command as well. And you need to be able to allow your leaders to lead, but also give them proper feedback in a respectful, you know, professional manner. So that was really my first kind of push into how to be an effective combat leader, but also a servant leader. How do I look out for my guys? How do I make sure that when we go out with 11 people, we come back with 11 people? And how do we make sure that when we all go home, we all go home? You know, I've got two big things that I'm very prideful about that I take a lot of pride in is that, you know, we were a bunch of mechanics. Our staff sergeant had combat experience. None of the other ones did. And we went out and, you know, for 3 months, we were in firefights quite a bit. And we went out with 11, came back with 11. That wasn't 11 every time, but every time we went out with a mission, we came back with the same amount of people. And what's even, I don't know if it's pride or I'm grateful that those of us who come back, we've all had various challenges adjusting to being a civilian, but we're all still here. All 11 of us are still here. And I'm in contact with probably 8 of those guys on a regular basis. And we're all still here. We all have our different challenges. We all have these things, our battles that we face, but I know that I can make a phone call and talk to 8 of those guys. Right. And the rest are still out there. They're just, they're just not in communication.
Mm-hmm. No, and that's a rarity and stuff like that, where, I mean, again, 35 years since you started, whenever your tour happened. And that is a rarity for stuff like that, especially with kind of the global war on terror veterans and stuff like that. Like, those were multiple tours some guys do, and gals, where you're like, how many tours did you do there? 4 to Afghanistan, 2 to Iraq. And you're like, man, like, yeah. And that was all within this short span. It was just go, 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 go. And I mean, for some, the emotional tolls and stuff like that, what they witnessed, they just couldn't take it. And, we lost those great individuals, sometimes due to the system just not being where it needed to be to catch that number of veterans that, it wasn't like other time periods where, there's a little bit of a conflict here, and okay, it might be a few troops that got injured, and few troops that'll have it. This was
20 years.
City-sized populations, really, of like major cities, of people that have lost limbs or traumatic injuries, brain injuries, stuff like that, like especially TBI, like all those breachers and stuff like that, like years of setting that charge by the door and blowing off. And now they've got stuff, but there was no one event that they can go, see, this is what happened on this date, this time. It was, no, over these number of tours, breaching, all the, bombs and everything going off. Now I have these problems. It's because of you guys. And now they have to try and fight to prove, but again, sometimes that's the problem with sometimes the bureaucracies of the Veterans Affairs systems, is that you have people that don't know what it's like to have 3 artillery shells strapped together as an IED go off right beside your vehicle, and, the different things like that and what that causes and things. So I've always
I'm no expert on the Canadian Veterans Administration. I do know a little bit more about the U.S. side. I will say this, is that almost every single person I've talked to in my career with the VA, they have the best interests in mind. Mm-hmm. The bureaucracy can sometimes get in the way, and it's a big machine, and you use a lot of red tape, and that can be frustrating. But I think if you're willing to advocate for yourself, the VA is there to look after you. Mm-hmm. It might not do it the best way. They might have some things that you don't agree with, but they're not there to get rid of you. They're not there to spit you out. They're there to, they're there to look after you. And sometimes it can be frustrating, the navigating through it, or for, our Canadian audience, stick handling through that. It can be frustrating. But I will say, for the most part, the VA, I don't have a lot of complaints about the people that I've dealt with. Mm-hmm. The systems, sometimes I get frustrated with, and that can be difficult. But if I went down to the VA hospital today and said, hey, I need some help, someone's going to say, I got you, brother. Right? We're going to look after you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've noticed that too. It's more of the system. Like, my case manager and my education coordinator are amazing women. And, there's times though too, where they'll talk to me like, look, we're just dealing with the system. This is, we got to plan, you don't think things are going to be short-term. You got to plan out, okay, this is going to take a little bit, because it does have to go through all the levels and the stuff like that. And that unfortunately is the problem, especially for some of those that we've ever known, that their problems are very severe in this direct moment, and they don't have sometimes the ability to last for that period of time. I mean, for me, it took about 2.5 years to kind of get everything sorted, because it is a big system, and there's a lot of things that have to be checkboxed before you get to move to that next level. But once it happens, you're lucky and good. But sometimes it's that getting everything going, or if something new comes up or the injuries get worse, then depending on where you live. And that's also the problem though too with Canada, is that some people live remote and they're nowhere near the Veterans Affairs facilities, and they have to see veteran doctors in order to get their cases looked at and stuff like that. So sometimes that is also the problem as well. But again,
I just want to back it up a little bit on that. When I was in the Marines, and coming home from combat, our critical incident debrief was okay, if you guys are having trouble mentally, we'll send you up and get you admitted into the psych ward. If not, you can go home on leave. Mm-hmm. And even prior to that, when I was in, any sort of deadly force situation, while I was in Mogadishu, my debrief was, well, if you want to drink, you can go over to the supply tent. Corporal Montero has a couple bottles of Jack Daniels, or you can go over and see the chaplain. And those were your two choices. Mm-hmm. I look back now, I'm like, man, that's, obviously I know I would go choose a chaplain, but at the time I wasn't drinking, nor was I a Christian. So there really was no structured debrief. There was informal debrief, which is those of us who went through it. We'd sit around while we're cleaning our guns and kind of talk about it a little bit. But there was no sort of professional guide or professional help. And then, you fast forward now, from my understanding and talking to guys who have been out recently, is you come back from your tour in combat, wherever it is, and you might, your home base might be, say, Fort Lewis, where you're going to Kentucky to a resort for a week. And we're gonna go through some decompression classes, and we're gonna teach you how to, maybe recognize some things that are coming up and talk about those things. You look back, and I've heard this on another podcast. Not that I'm here to promote anybody else, but the Jocko Willing podcast, and he talks about it quite in depth. Is you look at World War II, their critical incident debrief was in the hull of a ship floating back from Japan or Europe. So that's where guys learned how to talk through their feelings and, their combat fatigue is what they called it then. Mm-hmm. We know it now as a post-traumatic stress, dealing with it, but they had that debrief. For those of us who kind of were in that in-between phase where, we're coming home on a plane, it takes us 9 hours to get home. All of a sudden, now you're in, I went from shooting people on Monday to dinner at my dad's place on Friday, mm-hmm. with no sort of professional psychiatric help saying, hey, you might have some troubles. You might find that you're having some difficulty. Here's some things you can do. Here's the number you can call. We didn't even have that. It was like, if you get in trouble, here's here's the on-duty NCO that you're going to have to call. And that was it. So it is good to see that they've taken a lot of the stigma out of it, mm-hmm. and allow guys to have a venue to be able to vent that stuff without feeling kind of, I don't know if persecuted, but without feeling the pressure of that peer pressure, because you were never encouraged to say, yeah, I'm having nightmares, I'm having this, I'm having that. That was never like it is now, with the 22 a day, issues that you hear about, these veterans that are, losing the battle well after they get home. There is a lot more emphasis put on that, mm-hmm. than 26 years ago when I got out. So it is good to see it evolve. There's always more that can be done, but part of it too is I think we need to, this is just my opinion, I think we need to better prepare guys before they get out for when they get out. Mm-hmm. We need to better prepare guys for how to handle situations before they happen as opposed to after. Preventative maintenance is way better than corrective maintenance. Mm-hmm. And not just when you're fixing vehicles, but how about when you're putting back you're putting your warriors back together after being, you put them in harm's way for up to a year. Okay, well, let's take the time to make sure we fix them when they come back. We don't just throw them back in the lineup and say, okay, when you're ready to go, let's do it again.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's going to be better for the next generation, just because with the global war on terror veterans and stuff, they saw what things were lacking, and whether it was they start their own initiatives or find another one that was already established and just their talent made it go to that next level. I mean, there's so many of those great organizations and charities, things that I follow that I would love to interview one day, but they found a lacking a need and then they figured out how to do it. And I think you're also seeing now with different countries looking at the different psychedelics and stuff like that to help with PTSD, and figuring out that if you do it right with therapy, wow, it is making a remarkable difference. So I think your generation went through, it's like, here's a bottle of whiskey. If you have a tear or cry, then we're going to think of you as weak and we're going to persecute you out. Yeah. To nowadays where, people understand that, look, an individual, it doesn't matter if you're regular infantry or one of the best tier 1 operators there is. there may become an event that you are part of. And that's it. It doesn't matter if it's your first war or you've done 12 tours already and you're established, that we do have a breaking point, and that within the military, there needs to be the apparatus to go, okay, look, you got it? Not a problem. Look, come over to this training company. We'll get you out of that. We'll still get you doing stuff, but you know what? We're going to get you more of these treatments and stuff like that. You keep it kind of.
I think the more we get veterans serving in government, not just, getting out, but when they're serving in government, they realize that taking care of veterans, there's going to be no financial ROI. You're not going to all of a sudden have this big windfall because you looked after your veterans. It's the cost of doing business. Mm-hmm. I think the more we have veterans that are, involved in making of policies and carrying out these policies, they're going to realize, okay, it's not just a dollar and cents thing. I remember years ago, this must be 7-8 years ago, I saw Justin Trudeau was doing a town hall meeting in Edmonton. Mm-hmm. And a guy got up, and he was a veteran, and he was talking about, he's just looking for some help. He had lost his leg and I think his spleen. And this is a prime minister, and I don't mean to bash him, but this is kind of the mindset at the time. He just said, I know you're asking, what you guys are asking for, you're asking for too much. Don't ask for so much. And I just thought, holy cow, this was right after he got home from doing this tour in India. They cost the taxpayers just a ton of money. And it was because he's not a veteran. He didn't have the ability to read the room and be like, oh, wait a minute, you know what, maybe I should take a look at the other side of it. So, looking after our veterans is never going to be a financial reward, in that you're not going to get that money back directly. Where you will get indirect success will be, Brian, you come back from combat, I'm in the government. If we can help you get through all the things you need to get through so that you can be now a productive member of Canadian society, and maybe you start this company or that company, it will make us better. But that takes a lot more forethought, knowing that, okay, you know what, Brian, we're going to have to get you through a lot of post-traumatic stress debrief training. We're going to retrain you so that you can do a job. Let's say you lost your legs. Okay, well, we're going to get you retrained to do a job that you can do that fulfills your purpose, that doesn't require you to be able to have legs. Whatever it is. I'm just saying that the sooner we can get our governments, both U.S. and Canada, to realize that, okay, it's going to take a substantial amount of investment to make this success. As you and I, being veterans, we see these veteran-owned companies and we see the success that they have. But, we're seeing 10% of the people that finally decided to take the bull by the horns. Mm-hmm. And if you're wondering what that groan is, that's my dog in the background. There he is. There, he likes to groan when he sleeps. So, these veteran-owned companies, they're great. They're great for the country. They're moving us forward. It doesn't really matter what the product is. They're productive, and when they're productive, and they hire other veterans, now we get more veterans that are productive, that are not having to rely on the government for their financial success, right? They've got a job, they have a purpose. Not only do they have a financial purpose, in putting food on the table, but they have that emotional purpose, that sense of mission. Mm-hmm. And, we're going to get into it, but that's one of the main things that serving first responders has, is that we want people to be able to have a next mission after they take the uniform off.
Yeah, and exactly. And I think, again, hard times make soft men, soft times make hard times. And we're kind of in that little weird period of it. And, where you want to listen to as many people's opinions, but we still have to learn that a lot of people's opinions are dumb, uninformed, or just plain kind of evil when you look down on some of them.
Yeah.
And
just looking some stuff up here.
Not a problem.
I was looking at some of the veteran-owned companies that are out there, and it just, to me, I think that they're doing a phenomenal job on equipping fellow veterans. Mm-hmm. And it's great that we look out for each other, but I think as a whole, the country needs to look out for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's always those weird. I mean, when you look at politics, there's little clans within all the governments, right? And it's like the military, right? You've got your clothing store people, you've got your finance people, you've got this and that and everything, and all these little cliques. And they all want to have a little bit more power, or little things like that. And it's just, again, it's sad when it affects the troops at the bottom of the line, where all of a sudden, hey, look, the budget didn't go up. So now we're still dealing with, this same old kit, or these old housing that somebody's probably still living in a housing unit that you lived in at one time on a base, right? And it's unfortunate where they can't just go, look, we got all this money. We have military people that are trained to be builders and build houses and these things like that. Why not be that part of their training where, okay, your final thing, you guys are going to build some basic quarters for, married couples or single quarters or whatever it is. And you're actually getting those troops to put real world skills, building something that they are helping other troops not live in the mold infested places that they're at. And I just kind of wonder why it's like, look, you have those kinds of units. Why don't you just have them go from base to base, and every year, hey, we got these little projects, this group of, this class now, they're going to learn their electrical stuff. All right, well, here's a bunch of units that need the electrical, and then the next thing goes through. And you just make troops do something productive. I mean, they're getting paid anyways. And you're helping the base, you're helping other troops. But again,
that's a great idea, because there's a lot more people that can benefit from something like that. You got a guy who's getting ready to get out. Well, he just had a 1-year apprenticeship on being an electrician. Mm-hmm. When he was in, he had a military version of being an electrician. Now there's a civilian application, because they just went and they built on-base housing in Okinawa for 50 new families. All right, well, great. Now you can come out of there and say, yeah, not only do I have the experience of being electrician in military application, but also as a civilian application as well.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I feel like either you're on workup training, you're doing stuff like that, or you're just sitting around. Most units, that's what it is.
There's a lot of hurry up and wait.
Unless you're ready to go overseas, you're waiting around. And if you're in the worst cycle of a unit could be, where you're getting nothing and they're just doing the bare minimum training to keep you qualified on your weapons and whatnot, and make sure you know how to still navigate, that could be a hard time. But again, there's a lot of units that go through that. Okay, you're not going over. Well, then start going to different bases, and start working on these little projects. There's a ton of stuff that I'm pretty sure you give some of those units a week or a month, and you'd be like, they did all this. Yeah, all they needed was the supply. They had the know-how, and now look, we've got all these new units. We can tear down those old ones, move the troops over, start over there and do that, and just do those little projects and stuff. And it's not going to happen on every base right away and get done. But if it was a solid, good 10-year kind of plan of, okay, let's start building these houses up. Let's get it. I mean, you look at some of the videos online, you're like, that's a lot of black mold. Okay, let's see what we can do. And you hear politicians talking about it, and usually it's the ones that were in the military, like those same, I lived in that quarter. The mold just got bigger. We got to do something for this. But again, the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Going to the Marines again, what was your favorite course that you got to do while in the Marines?
I was a mechanic, so I took a lot of mechanic courses, and I would rank those up with not favorites, because I'm not good at it. It's not what I like to do. It just happened to be my job. Mm-hmm. I like doing a lot of the leadership courses. Back in those days, it was correspondence. Now it's online for a lot of that stuff. But the leadership courses to me those were the best. I enjoyed doing, troop movement type stuff, but really it's about how to be effective leaders for the people that you have under your charge.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, exactly. But unfortunately, a lot of people, they don't take the leadership courses as seriously like that. It's a check mark in the box, and then I'm on the way. And yeah, I learned something. I learned I don't like that base in the chow hall, right? But yeah, I think leadership, but also pushing leadership stuff to lower levels like privates and lance corporals, get more of that, start building that more strategic. Because I think for some people, they get that apprehension of that's not leadership. That's not for me. And they'll avoid that and they'll spend their whole career never advancing because they've had a fear of doing some leadership. Where I think if those things got pushed down to allow privates, corporals, stuff like that, to start getting a little bit more, okay, here, you know what? We're going to put you in charge of one other person. Do this.
It's funny, the guys that were, I'm trying to keep this cleaner language, but the guys who are real screw ups, a lot of times I would, this is when I was a corporal, sergeant, and staff sergeant. If they were a real screw up, I'd give them something that required them to have some responsibility. Give them some responsibility. Give them something to develop their leadership skills. A lot of times, the guys that are really screw ups, nobody can trust them with anything because they haven't proven it yet. Well, the other side is they haven't been given an opportunity in which to take the bull by the horns. So there's been a few guys. There's one guy named Donnelly who was a Lance Corporal that worked for me, and he just constantly screwed up. He'd show up late, this, that, and the other. So I put him in charge of a fire team, and all of a sudden he's there early. He's looking out for other guys. He took an ass chewing for one of his guys, and he realized, okay, I got to step it up if I'm going to lead. And he became, got promoted to corporal and then to sergeant, and he was a very effective sergeant. He was great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of potential in people, but either due to something they just don't want to do that. Maybe because they got yelled at for something else, and they're like, "Look, if I become a leader, a lot more spotlight's on me." But mm-hmm. I think those things of instead of just beasting somebody with PT and be like, "Are you going to be stupid again?" Giving them that responsibility makes them go, "Okay, look." And then it also fosters different things other than just building up their muscles and hating mm-hmm. whatever burpees or whatever thing that you've chosen to make them do. What is one of the worst places that you've been to, either on operations or a base that you're like, "Oh, I got this place. This is going to be a fun little time"?
That would probably be Mogadishu, Somalia. That was a horrible place. People were dying, and there was dead bodies everywhere, and the stench was just disgusting, and complete breakdown of any sort of government control. It wasn't total anarchy, but it was definitely pockets of anarchy. People battling for control of the country, and for us to step in and be all of a sudden, we're trying to bring Western ways to African civilization that, they're not used to it. They don't know how to handle it. And it was very adversarial, I thought. They're looking for us to save them as long as we save them in the way they want to be saved. Yet, the U.S. military machine is not always trained to save Somalians in the Somalian way. We're trained to save Somalians in the U.S. way. And so those don't always match up. But I would say, the word that I've always used to describe Mogadishu when I was there was desperation. They're living lives of desperation.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate like that sometimes, where the mission and the outcome that you want, they're not always going to work just because of either its cultural differences or anything else that it could be, where it's just the wrong time to try and show people like that, just because that's not they're not that, "Oh, everyone gets a voice and yes, you get elected." It's no, there's a strong man. He tells us what to do. What do you mean we all get voices? What do you mean my enemies are the same as me now? No, we're better than them because we're in charge and stuff. Yeah, it is. And again, I mean, that's been like that for warfare and helping people throughout eons, right? Like the best intentions sometimes lead to the worst results, because what we feel that they want, they're like, "Nah, we just want some food right now. We'll worry about governance and all those things later on. But right now, I just don't want to starve to death. And I don't want those guys shooting me when I try and sleep."
Yeah, absolutely.
So what was then your favorite place to go to? Because you said 19 countries. What one was one that you're like, you know what?
I really enjoyed my second trip to Korea. I went over there in '96 to Seoul, and we had worked in building a small little combat village right up near the DMZ. So I got to experience not only, first time I went, I was way down south in Pohang. But the second time I went, I went as a sergeant, so I had a little more responsibility, a little more rank, a little more freedom, and I got to experience the city of Seoul, which was just just amazing. And then also to go out and truly appreciate the culture that I saw once we got out of the city and we were up near the DMZ, and, just seeing some of the, where our project was, you could see remnants from the Korean War. It was, I'm a bit of a history buff, so it was really cool to see that part of it. So yeah, that was probably one of my favorite places to get deployed to, was Korea.
Nice. Now, what was your favorite piece of kit while you were in the Marines that you just loved to use, have, be around? What was that one thing you're like, everything's fine, we've got this?
It's kind of a love-hate relationship with my rifle, right? Like I love it. It was the thing that saved your life. It was the thing that got you through everything. But anybody who's ever had to try to turn in a rifle to the armory, it knows the frustration of, it's not clean enough. You're like, oh, for crying out loud. Like, it's so, yeah, a bit of a love-hate relationship. The more I used it, the less I wanted to use it, because I knew I was going to get dirty and it was going to require work that I didn't want to do. So there's that. That's never had that question before. What was the piece of kit that I liked the most? It certainly wasn't a backpack. It certainly wasn't a rucksack, because having to do long humps with those things, it creates the sores that are here, sores on your back, and I hated that stuff.
Yeah, especially, back in the day, that was like some of the worst kind of kit or whatever that you could wear. Nowadays, they've a lot more into it and going, oh, hey, wait, the spine curves this way. Maybe we should have something that works that way too. And yeah, there's always that stuff with kit where you're like, who designed this? Are they trying to have us lose or demoralize us completely? Like, what is this? And then there's other times you're like, that piece of kit's amazing. Is there more? No, we only had that one. Now it's gone. Wasn't it cool though when it went off? You're like, oh man. Yeah, it's always that either you have so much of something that you're like, this is kind of useless, but we got to pack this anyways. And there's that one rare piece of kit that you rarely have, or it's so great, but it weighs a ton. You're like, this is so great, but let's do this. Was there any kind of memento or something that you had to carry on you while on operations?
Actually, I have something I carry with me to this day that my sister gave me in 1991. So she was 11, she's born in 80. So she gave it to me, in 92. So she's 12. And it's the prayer in my pocket. It's this little business card thing and it's a little prayer. And I bet you I've read it 4 or 5 times in my life. But I carry it in my wallet to this day. I carried it with me through combat, through multiple deployments. Everywhere I went is with me, and I still carry it to this day. That's kind of the cool thing. I've got a little film canister. Since we moved to Arizona, I can't find it, but I know I got it somewhere that has dirt, some sand from Mogadishu. But obviously I didn't carry that with me everywhere I went. When you ask about something I carried with me, the prayer in my pocket.
Yeah, so
that's pretty cool.
It's funny you had to say film canister. A lot of kids now go, what do you mean film in a canister? I knew what you were talking about.
Yeah. Be where your parents kept their bud.
Did workup training help you prepare for operations, or was the real world such a beast that when you're down range, all bets are off?
We did a little bit of crowd control training before we deployed to Mogadishu. I remember a little bit, and that did help. But we didn't do any real convoy training. A lot of it was, you got to figure it out when you get there. You learn the basics in garrison so that you can make the real-time decisions when you're out, on the other side of the wire. When you stepped out of the wire, you're ready. You have a basis on which to make those kind of on the fly decisions. Mm-hmm. Is that as vague as I could get?
It is, but again, that's the real world. You can plan for everything, but you can't plan how the enemy's going to react. That one piece of kit that you were relying on is all of a sudden a dud in the moment of need. No matter how many times you check. Yeah, it's working. It's working. Okay, do it. It's not working now, right? Like, you can always plan everything, but when it kind of comes down to it, you're getting trained with what they either think they had or what happened prior, but everything's always changing. Hence why, like, workup is always different every time you do a workup.
Well, this is not my quote. I can't take credit for it, but you know who never showed up at any of our briefings? The enemy. The enemy never showed up. Yeah. Right. So you always have the other side of it. You can do your best to prepare for all the briefings and intel and everything else, but they don't show up to that.
Yeah, exactly. Who's your hero from the Marines that inspired you at the start of your career, and who did you learn about while in that continued that inspiration?
Well, chesty puller is always, that's every Marine,
Yeah.
A chesty puller, the highest decorated Marine of all time, was awarded 5 Navy Crosses. Was retired as a 3-star. But yeah, he's pretty amazing. There's other stories. John Basilone, another, he won the Medal of Honor, came back from his first campaign. I think it was in Guadalcanal is where he was awarded the Medal of Honor. And he actually wound up dying in combat after he did a U.S. bond tour. Finally got released from that to go back and serve in the Pacific and was killed in action. But he's kind of a big one. And there's, you go through the list right now. One of the guys that I admire the most is a gentleman by the name of Dakota Meyer. Dakota Meyer was awarded the Medal of Honor for action. I think it was in 2009 in the Kandahar province. And, if you ever get a chance to read his book, hear his story, I can't believe it hasn't been made into a movie yet, because it is absolutely some crazy Rambo type stuff. And as amazing as that story is, the story afterwards of Dakota's journey is, I find, even more amazing. Mm-hmm. He says, everybody wants to celebrate the absolute worst day of my life on a regular basis. And he says, you know how hard that is, how hard it is. Everybody wants to talk about the absolute lowest day of my life. And I'm getting an award for it. He says that's not easy to get through.
Yeah. And his story is amazing. I love reading that one. But yeah, it's that thing too. And it's always with Victoria Cross winners. And, it's that humble thing. And so many of them are like, look, it's not about me. There were so many other individuals that were there. I'm just the one recognizing all their work and stuff like that. And it's those things where it's like they're some of the most humble beings, because everyone's like, you're a hero. And they're like, I'm not. Like, for some of them, it's like, I'm the guy that survived, or, And it's those things where it's just like, there's been a few different Victoria Cross and Medal of Honor winners I've been kind of reading up on, and not just what they did, but what some of them did afterwards, and just the amazing individuals that they were and continue to be and kept going.
But not only, everybody wants to say, oh, it's chesty, it's this. I'm going to give the names of 2 people that I worked with who were legends in my mind. Staff Sergeant Cahill, Mike Cahill, he joined in 74. And this is a guy who's a combat engineer, heavy equipment operator, but was in almost every major conflict from the fall of Saigon up until the time he retired after Operation Restore Hope in Mogadishu. He went to it all. And I remember putting together his shadow box, and I was like, holy crap, this guy has got a lot of awards, because he'd been there, done that. And he was absolutely the best leader we could have had when we went over to Mogadishu. He was a staff sergeant that was in charge of our whole section. And this is the guy that hey, Mike, your hair's on fire. Oh, no problem. We'll just put it out. Right. And humor, looked out for us, just an all around great leader. He's one of these guys that really fared well in combat and stressful situations in deployment, struggled when he wasn't. When he was in the rear with the gear, had a tough time. But I learned a lot of amazing lessons from him. Another guy is a sergeant major I worked for, Sergeant Major Burns, and he was, after he got out of boot camp and, before Vietnam, he never handled rifles until he was a sergeant. He was two pistols, tunnel rat, fighting the Viet Cong. Like, holy crap, this guy. And I remember, I would work out with this guy every day at lunch, and this is in the early mid 90s. And, he's 20 years older than me, 15, 20 years older than me. And I could barely keep up. Like, he was like physically fit, phenomenal guy. He'd gone through his demons, and he realized that Jack Daniels was not a good counselor. Jim Beam was not a great person to help you through tough times. And so he was able to get through that. And he taught me a lot of great leadership lessons as well. Those two guys, I mean, they're just amazing. And I still keep in touch with Sergeant Major Burns. He's one of these guys that his example was inspiring.
Yeah, well, those tunnel rat stories, man, those guys were crazy, and just the cojones on them. Like, all right, here's dark. There's a pistol, a flashlight. Try not to have a creature that has been booby trapped in there to bite you or punch you. Like, oh.
And you know what? He never told stories about that. He never told stories about what his combat was like. He just told about lessons learned. So he was like, he was one of those guys that you knew he'd seen some stuff, but he didn't have to tell you. Mm-hmm. He just carried it. He carried it that way, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Some of those stories, deep, dark, and what, like, you have no idea what you're going to, how far it's going to be, I remember it was just an amazing documentary I watched on the tunnel rats, and you just have so much, like, just pride in what those individuals did, and just going, oh, all right, you're short, you're small, you got the stature to fit in these tiny holes, go. Yeah. Was there ever a course or qualification that you were hoping to get in the Marines, but just timing, scheduling just didn't line up with?
Jump qualified. Yeah, I always wanted to get some jump wings. Never really worked out. I look back on it now; it's probably a good thing. I have enough injuries as it is. I don't need to get more injuries for jumping out of a perfectly good airplane.
Yeah, that was mine too, but I still am going to jump out of a plane once I get these injuries all sorted and stuff out again. This summer it was going to be with Operation Pegasus Jump, but I'll do that next summer, get this body back in, and I want to jump out of a plane.
You're going to do it. You're going to do it for sure.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, and that's it's run by a PPCLI guy who's one of the founders of it, and great. Look, yeah, I'm wanting to interview him as well. But yeah, it's just one of those things where it was always, I wanted it, but the injury happened so early in my career. It was just like, yeah, I can't be a lawn dart. Maybe with the canopy, I control a nice descent, but yeah. Was there ever a course that you thought you were going to own, but it humbled you as soon as you kind of got into it?
All of it. all it was all. I was never valedictorian of anything. I never failed anything, but I was never valedictorian of anything. Most courses I went through with the attitude of, I'm here to learn. I'm not here to shine. I'm here to learn. And I think that's what helped me get through. Oh, this dog is groaning away.
What was like the capping stone of your Marine career? What was it that you're like, yeah, that kind of, it was a nice kind of the ending to it, or it felt like that was the moment when you're like, you know what? There we go.
Yeah. Getting promoted to staff sergeant. I was happy about that. I'm not sure if this is the answer that you're looking for, but what I take the most pride in is that, for a 21-year-old corporal who had no business being in leadership of anything, went into Africa and got shot at a regular basis, and led 11 guys. And every day we went out with 11, we came back with 11. If we went out with 7, we came back with 7. Every day we went out, we came back. I had plotted out how many firefights we were in, and on average, we were in 2 firefights every 3 days. So not quite one a day, but pretty good op tempo. And we, all those that went came back. And so when you were asking what is kind of that thing, that's the thing. That's the thing. All the different medals and stuff that I got, the one that I take pride in is the combat action ribbon. It's, you ask anybody who's been in the military, that's the one you want to get, but you don't want to get it, right? Mm-hmm. what it requires to get is a big risk, but it's I've had people ask, well, how could you want to go to combat? I'm like, hey, you don't join a baseball team, go to practice day after day, and when a game breaks out, like when you have a scheduled game, you don't, oh yeah, you know what, I'm going to sit the game out. No, this is what you've been training for. This is what you want. You want to get in there, but you don't go into a game hoping that you go to overtime. You go into a game hoping to win. Right. That's the goal of going into a baseball game. That's the same thing with going into combat. You're not there for a good time or a long time. You're there to get it done. Right. You're there to just kill it, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, it's that different mentality of those that served and the civilian mindset that have no desire to serve. They can never understand, why do you go in those miserable conditions for training? How long was it raining for? It was a record 2 months nonstop rain while you were in that training area. Like, they don't get that, the suffering and the things that some people don't mind putting them through. Like you said, with your guy there, if he wasn't in combat, he felt wrong. He had to feel that situation to feel his true self, in a sense. And they don't. Those have been in the
military. Know that one guy that, should put him in a glass case that says break glass only in case of combat. Right. They're the ones that when they're in garrison, you're like, oh God, who's going to watch this guy? Because he's going to get in trouble.
Yep. MP's getting called again.
Steve McQueen's of the world.
Yeah. So let's switch over to policing now. What inspired you to join the police force and also VPD in particular?
Okay, well, when I got out of the Marine Corps, I thought I'd get out, go to school, and go back in, and so I moved up to Canada and into Vancouver, and I had a family friend that was a Vancouver cop, and I had met my wife, and she was like, hey, listen, I'm proud of you for doing what you did. She goes, but this is when we were just dating. She goes, we got to get this out there now. She goes, I'm not interested in caravanning around the world, going to a place to have you to sit in an empty house for you to be deployed. She goes, I want us to have a family and get married, but I want it to be here and stable. And I was of the same opinion. I'm like, it's time for me to take the next step. So it took me a little bit to get hired by the police because I didn't have a university degree. And at the time it was very much about make sure you have a degree. I had enough university that when I finally did get hired, I was in the middle of the semester. I went in and told the professor I withdrew. And he says, well, it's the middle of the semester. I'm like, you no longer serve a purpose. The purpose of me taking this course was to get hired by the police. So Vancouver, I picked Vancouver because they weren't the RCMP, and nothing against the RCMP, but the RCMP, you had to go to Regina for 6 months and you didn't get paid. I had our son was born at that time. One, I didn't want to be away from the family for 6 months, and nor could I afford to do it without a paycheck. So it was, that's why I picked Vancouver. I wanted that paramilitary structure because I knew that I could thrive in that. Mm-hmm. I knew that I could thrive in a mission-oriented occupation. Does that make sense?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, again, for some people, and then if you're in the RCMP, you don't know where you're being posted to. Yeah. You're out of Vancouver, and all of a sudden you're going, we're going to Nova Scotia? Okay. Right. So that's the other thing too. You, just like in the military, you have to be willing to relocate every so often.
If I was 20 years old and single, I think the RCMP would have been way more attractive to me than the Vancouver Police. Mm-hmm. Because of the ability to, I get to go visit other places, go see the world, and you're going to pay for it. I'm in.
Yeah, exactly. What was the first time early on in your career that you were tested as a police officer?
Shoot, man, it was, tested. there's different tests, different levels of test, right? I went from being a Marine and a combat veteran to being what we refer to in policing as a piss kid, the rookie. Nobody gives a damn about what you think you know. I went from being up here, kind of a big deal. I could sit down at a bar and someone's going to buy me a beer because I'm going to tell a really cool story, to shut up, kid. Nobody cares. Get in the wagon and go do your job. We got work to do. So that was a learning. I was learning, like, hey, you know what? Stop reading your own press clippings, especially the ones you wrote yourself. This is not the Ty show. This is Vancouver Police. So there was that. And, I was fortunate early on in my career to be put in some spots where I had to learn some experienced guys that kind of took me under their wing and said, okay, hey, listen, here's a good way to get through this, the police subculture type thing. But there's been lots of challenges. I joined in 2002. By 2005, I was doing a lot of kind of call out work or stuff geared towards gang enforcement. That was, my career was leading me towards that. I sought out files and calls that had that gang thing to it, because I mean, honestly, not to sound all rah, but I didn't like bullies. I couldn't stand them. And I thought, nobody has ever stood up to these guys. And I've got, not only do I have the authority, but I've got the confidence and I've got the people that I'm working with that I am going to stand up to these guys. And they're not going to push Joe Citizen around, and they're definitely not going to push me around. So, I was fortunate. I worked with, two guys pretty much my entire career. Guy was my partner, guy was my boss. And without those guys, there's no way I could have done gang policing for as long as I did. And not only that, is without those two guys, my wife would not have had that peace of mind knowing that I'm going to be okay because I was working with these two guys. Mm-hmm. We'll call them Mick and Iggy. Those are their nicknames. But yeah, Mick was the boss. Iggy was my partner. And when I say partner, like, a lot of times we were just in the same squad. We weren't always in the same car. We were in the same squad. And, for a lot of time, we were in patrol. I took a lot of recruits. I did a lot of recruit training. And Iggy took more of that kind of the second in command. He was senior to me role. But the three of us were always kind of found ourselves digging into gang stuff, and let's go see if we can upset the apple cart here.
So that was always kind of the pathway. Were there any other kind of things you're like, oh, that's kind of an interesting branch of policing as well?
My first 2 summers on the job, I had a very, very difficult job within the department. I was on beach patrol, so I had to, it's unfortunate, but I had to ride ATVs up and down the beach of the west side. It was, let's all feel sorry for Ty. It was, it was a lot of fun on days that it was, what's hot in Celsius, like 40 degrees.
Well, yeah, that's kind of pretty.
And I was thinking, on days that it was in the high 90s, it wasn't always so much fun riding on the ATVs because it's hot. The guys that rode in the air conditioning car, those were the senior guys. I was a junior guy. I rode the ATV, but it was a lot of fun. So, I mean, there's cool stuff I got to do when I first came on, and I worked in a district that allowed me to learn a lot more stuff. But, I always wanted to go where there was, where the gangsters were. And that was the downtown core of Vancouver. They call it District 1. But yeah, once I got down there, it was okay, I'm in the show here, right? There's no more messing around. We don't have time. It was a high tempo at the time. It was, the busiest section of the city, and we were go. And that's when I first started working for Mick. That's when I first started working with Iggy. And that was where I really learned how to be a more effective police officer.
Okay. Which course or training did you learn the most about yourself while in the VPD, and how did it help develop the skill sets that you had? A couple of really good courses that I took. One was source handling, how to handle confidential informants, and it was never really my strength, but I did handle a few. When you're in the gang world, you're going to get guys that want to talk.
Not always. Like that wasn't my big strength, but it did teach me how a little more of the human side of it and how to speak with people. That it's not always talking at them. Sometimes you talk with them, and learning that side of it. I never really had that Stockholm syndrome for sure, but I also started realizing that I can be an asshole to everybody and get nothing. And have a tough time, or you can treat people professional. The good thing about being a gang cop is most of the gangsters I dealt with were professional criminals. They weren't amateurs, right? So it made it a little easier. Another great course that I took was we call it the carbine rifle operators course. When I took that course, and the first time I fired the C8 the C8, mm-hmm. which is basically, it was an M16. And the smell of the cordite was like, it was like home. It was like mm-hmm. back in the Marines, and I had that confidence. And that was a pretty good course, but probably the coolest course, or the one that I really learned a lot, was I did a witness protection, VIP protection course mm-hmm. on how to basically do tactical bodyguarding. That was an intense couple weeks. That was a really good course that I took. I learned a lot on that one.
Now, just to go back to it, what is kind of the difference between like the amateur criminal and the professional criminal? Just so other people kind of understand why you liked working, or like, those kind of people were a little bit easier to.
Well, it's the difference of the guy who's breaking into cars to get money for some rock versus the guy that wears a vest that has a flaming death head on the back. I'm not going to say who they are because they're scumbags, but that's what they do. As far as that's their chosen occupation, right? Is to be a criminal and to be good at it, right? What I liked about it is that they didn't take it personal, right? If I pull over, one of these motorcycle enthusiasts, for the most part, they didn't take it personal. They have their thing that they have to do and kind of, push back and not be too compliant. But at the end of the day, you treat them with respect. They treat you with respect until it's time not to. The professional criminal made it a lot easier. When you're dealing with a whole bunch of these guys on various different kind of levels or ranks within their organization, all I got to do is go to the top guy and say, hey, and this I learned from Mick, get your dog in line or I'm going to jerk its chain and you're going to feel it. And the thing about professional criminals is, they want path of least resistance. And I remember telling guys, like, one time I had one of these guys in cuffs, and he was, complaining a little bit. I said, well, hold on a second, just so you know, like, you're at the advantage, not me. Right? Everything is slanted towards you succeeding. You commit crime, and 90% of the time, I don't even know it. I can't prove it. So when I catch you 10% of the time, take your lumps. Right? It's not, it's part of the game. It's part of your chosen profession. And they're, for the most part, they're okay with it.
Now, professional criminal versus amateur criminal. Who would like flee or run where you're like, okay, now we got to call the dogs, or I got to run and chase behind this guy? Who was more likely the group to try and get away?
Amateurs. Yeah. They don't think long term.
Yeah. So what was your favorite piece of kit to use as a police officer?
My favorite to use were cuffs. The one that I used the most was my mouth. To be able to speak and talk, the communication. This was the level of force that on the use of force continuum is from verbal dialogue, used it 95% of the time. Yeah, but what I like to do, put cuffs on bad guys. Yeah.
Was there any kind of training that didn't exist when you started, but once it was developed, it changed the way in policing remarkably?
Absolutely. That was bringing in the patrol rifle. The patrol carbine rifle. Prior to that, only guys in SWAT or ERT carried those kind of force options. And when those of us in patrol and those sections that had either some military background, that type of thing, we've identified you as somebody that we think would be a good operator for that. It was great because not only were you allowed, did it give you another use of force option, but you became a natural leader. when you're the guy carrying the rifle, you're making a lot of the calls. It didn't matter seniority. You're the guy, who's got the biggest impact gun. So you're going to make a lot of those decisions. So, when I first came on, we didn't have it. And then when that came in, it was changing.
Okay. Is there anything that you think would be the next step of training that maybe isn't in the training cycle yet, but you think it would help the next generation of police officers?
I think, we always have to train for the worst day. We don't always train for the most consistent day. And consistently, we are talking with people, whether you're in patrol, talking with complainants, suspects, all that stuff, whether you're in gangs dealing with professional criminals, it's the talking. And I think the more we can do that kind of training, and it doesn't mean that you have to lay down, when you're using dialogue to diffuse a situation, it doesn't have to be viewed as weak. Sometimes, having to step up and say, hey, fuck face, shut the fuck up. That gets more attention, and that will achieve your result quicker than, hey, I'd really like your attention. And there's different ways. You speak a language in which the person that you're dealing with can understand. But I think if we had more of that style of training, more of the understanding who it is you're speaking with, whether it is, people who, are down and out in the skids, people who, you name it, right? If it's a indigenous community that has a high substance abuse rate, whatever the rates are, because I think it's just been my experience. This is not a hard, fast rule, but it's been my experience. Those communities deal with a higher percentage of substance abuse, a higher percentage of likely to re-enter the criminal cycle through abuse, through you name it. I think if we can learn that language, we would be a lot better.
And I think there are some police departments that are trying to mix mental health workers with police officers so that they have both those options kind of going to some of them.
Absolutely. The defund police movement that happened a few years ago, they wanted to stop having police officers and just have social workers. Yeah, that's fine and well, but not everybody you deal with is going to be able to adapt to what a social worker is telling them. Eventually, someone's going to say fuck you and punch a social worker in the face. You need to have somebody there who's has the ability, the means, and the fortitude to take on that role. The same way as dealing with mental people who are in mental crisis, to just have a guy who's never had any training and that's a cop issue. I think we're missing the boat there as well. I think having that hybrid version of that and having the ability to have training in that will definitely, it's definitely going to move the department forward.
Okay. What can police departments do to help bridge the lack of understanding to the public of the dangers that police officers face and the mental toll that they experience?
I don't know. To be honest, I don't know. It's a little above my pay grade. I think having having media relations, having social media out there, because that's a platform which so many people communicate on. So having a presence, knowing how to have a proper presence, I think is a good idea. It's community policing. When I first came on, community policing was walking a beat, having a community police office and going out and talking to people on the stoop. Nowadays, it's still that. I think we need that, but it's also being able to reach out through social media and be able to be viewed as a stakeholder in the community and not a dog chain, like to jerk it, right? You're there to be a part of it. Mm-hmm. There's Sir Robert Peel, who really came up with the principles of policing. Said that the community are the police are the community, the community are the police. Really, that's what community policing is based upon. It's like, you need to be out there. You need to get out of your car. You need to go and talk to people. You need to reach out and have opportunities for the public to interact with you, knowing that some will be negative for sure, but I think you're going to see people really not blend, but become part of the community through all these different platforms.
Yeah. Can you talk about what serving first responders offers and how your services are making an impact on those that serve?
Excellent. So now you're talking to, my passion. Oh, dog just jumped up on the couch to get a squeaky toy and stepped on a squeaky toy. So serving first responders. When I I'm officially not retired from policing. I'm on a long-term disability, which is in essence a medical retirement from policing. Sorry, distracted. It's a medical retirement from policing. I went through a bit of struggle. I went from being a gang cop for most of my career and doing TV show stuff and putting guns in the faces of bad guys and arresting homicides and shootings and all that other stuff. I went from doing that lifestyle to, because of different injuries, I wasn't doing that anymore. And then right about that time, COVID happened as well. So next thing you know, I go from being, working in, on the street and then an Intel center to upstairs bedroom in my house. Hold on a sec. Just take a quick pause, Brian.
Yeah, not a problem.
We took a break there. We're going to talk a little bit about serving first responders and kind of my path. And I think, if anybody's ever heard of Simon Sinek wrote a book called The Why, and basically says people will not believe in what you do until they know why you do it. And I think for serving first responders, the why comes from my story. So like I was saying, I was a gang cop and I was kind of doing all these things, and it was, kind of a really good tempo, and I was in my groove, but I was still having things weren't working out. Right. And, I went to an Intel center where I came off the road for a bit. My body was hurting, lots of injuries, that type of thing. And I just needed to recharge my batteries. And while I was at this Intel center, I had some surgery, and because of surgery, my long thoracic nerve was damaged, and that's a nerve that kind of comes up your back and controls around here. And it basically ruined my career. And then it took a lot of strength, mobility, that type of thing in my gun hand. So I was doing some desk duty, and, for a guy who was all about that type A personality, it was humbling for me. But it was, I don't push my belief on anybody, but I'm a Christian. I think, I'm a sinner saved by grace, and it was humbling for me, but God needed to humble me. I used to tell people the list of my identity was I was a gang cop first, and then I was a dad, and then I was a husband, and then I was a Christian was down the road if I had time for it. And I couldn't understand why things were always getting messed up, why I was always facing troubles. And for me, I had to get that right. I had to become, I really had to come to terms with what is my identity. And once I flipped that around, say I'm a Christian first, because you can take it all away. I'm a Christian, and that is my salvation. From there, I'm a husband, because a husband comes before father, because if it's not right with mom and dad, it's not going to be right with the kids. And when I realized that being a police officer, being a gang cop, was what I did for a living, it's not who I was. Then things started to change. But that doesn't happen overnight. God had to humble me, and he had to challenge me. And so I went from being, one of the pioneers in gang enforcement in British Columbia, one of the first ones to do that style of policing, to then I went to an Intel center where I was, taking a lot of my experience and knowledge and applying it to incoming calls and that real-time intelligence, to all of a sudden I was working telephone report taking, talking with Mrs. Smith. And then shortly after that, COVID happened, and I was living in the States, commuting across. So then now I'm working from home, from the upstairs bedroom. And that was a year that everything flipped upside down. Like, it just completely changed things. And I had a lot of trouble with it. I went from thinking I was all that in a bag of chips to where's all the guys? Like, how come nobody's coming around to check on me? Very much, oh, poor me. And the thing is the machine was still rolling. Right. All the guys that I used to hang out with, they still had calls to take. They're still going into the office. I'm the guy working from home. I'm the guy who got injured, not them. And, at first I had a lot of trouble dealing with that. And then eventually I was able to kind of make it through. But it started me down that road of there's more, right? I have two scripture verses tattooed on me. One is Philippians 4:13 says, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And I look at what I've done in my military career as well as, 20 plus years in policing. And, those things that I was able to make it through is because God gave me strength. The other scripture I have I've got them here on my arms. The other one over here is Proverbs 27:17 that says, as iron sharpens iron, so does one man sharpen another. And I think those go hand in hand. It's not up to me to get through all the things that I've gotten through as a police officer, but as a family, my wife and I made it through. For us not to turn around and help the next group. As you know, most first responders, they have two families. Right, they got their first one, then the divorce, and then their second one, and some even more than that. And my wife and I, we were married before we started policing, and we made it through. We're the oddity, but I know the struggle that I had, and it was evident that was going to play a bigger role as I approached retirement. So I was battling these injuries, trying to get it better. It wasn't getting better. It was actually getting worse. The nerve damage was. It focused back in my rhomboid and in my trap, and then I started getting headaches more and more, and I found I was getting sick, like migraine headaches, throwing up. Working from my upstairs bedroom, talking to Mrs. Smith and kind of triaging calls that were coming in, and so there was a senior guy who had retired a little bit before me named Tony. And Tony encouraged me to explore long-term disability. And at first I was like, no, Tony, that's not for me. That's for guys who are hurt. And he's like, listen up, you're hurt. Like, you're hurting. You've given your body to your career, and it's time for you to start looking after that. And Mick told me the same thing. And so I explored it, and I knew I was going to be retiring soon because I couldn't keep doing what I did. And I was just going to take the penalty of retiring early because I thought that was my only option. And through the long-term disability, I was able to medically retire in June of 22. And part of that decision was that we had to move to a different climate, a different area to where I wasn't getting sick all the time. So my wife and I, we've been able to make some decisions years ago that allowed us to leave our careers early. And so we moved down to the Phoenix area in November of 22. And I thought I was going to be the guy that just, I'm going to watch people play, pickleball or whatever, right? And then there were some things that had happened leading up to that started me thinking there's something else needs to be done. I was getting phone calls about like hero cops of mine who weren't able to deal with their demons and took their own lives. And the one that really got to me was a senior sergeant when I first came on named Rod, who was just, I've spoken to his family and to his kid's mom, and they've said, yeah, please share what our dad went through. So Roddy was a guy that he was a cop's cop, and any Vancouver guy listening to this will know who Rod Pedersen is. Cop's cop, like legendary, nothing fazed him. But he went through some hard things. His mentor was killed on the job, Larry Young, early on in his career, and Roddy had to be part of that, that call that happened. And as big a proponent as Rod was for critical incident stress management program, he never took advantage of it. When he retired, he went over to transit police for a little bit, and he couldn't tackle his demons. And I remember where I was when I got the call that said, yeah, they found Roddy and he had passed away. And the official cause wasn't suicide, but he killed himself with a bottle. It took him a while to do it. And it's unfortunate. I hear other stories of other guys on the job and did that. And I just think that's not what we're here to do, right? So that was a big proponent or kind of a push forward. We got down here. I took some classes through the Veterans Administration on how to start a business. And it was funny, for the years prior to that, doors were closing. And all of a sudden doors were kicking open and the path was being shown to my wife and I as that you need to help the next guy. You got that tattoo on your arm for a reason. It is time to sharpen iron. It's time to help the next person. Sorry. So having talked to other guys as they're approaching retirement and the frustrations of just different things that were going on, how do I make that next step? We realized that something that needed to happen. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I went to a program called TAP class, Transition Assistance Program, that taught us how to be civilians, how to write a resume, how to pay rent, how to do all these different things. And when I left policing, there's none of that. I had a half-hour Zoom session with my on retirement plans or pension plan. And the guy that gave it, bless his heart, he did his best. And his English is way better than my Punjabi, but I couldn't understand him. I was more confused than I was before. And my wife said, well, she's a retired teacher. She said, well, maybe you need to, attend mine. So we went to her Zoom one and same guy. Same guy gave the same course. So we're like, oh man, just confused. And when I left policing, there is no transition course. There is nothing. It's like, okay, you go attend the Zoom session and turn your gun in. And so it can be very difficult. And down here in the States, pretty much the same thing. There is no transition program for guys leaving 20, 30 years as a first responder, whether it's police, fire, corrections, dispatcher, you name it. So there is that challenge. There's the anxiety of, how do I write a resume? I mean, last time I wrote a resume was 2001, and I printed it out on paper and I handed it to a person. And that doesn't happen anymore, right? It goes through AI and it gets screened by people. And by the time human eyes have seen it, it's been filtered 3-4 times. When I got hired, there was no Indeed there. I don't even know if Facebook was out at the time. So it's a different world, right? It's a different, there is no LinkedIn. So, we started identifying 5 major challenges that those who are leaving the profession as a first responder face. And the first one was like, okay, well, where am I? When you go into a mall and you want to go to, for those in Canada, you want to go to the Bay, but you don't know where it is. You go to that big screen right when you walk in the door that says you are here. And then when you know where you are, you know how to get to where you're going. And that's kind of how we view our first presenter is they're experts in the pensions. And they give you a lay of the land. Okay, here's where you are. And maybe you don't need to work. Maybe you do. Maybe you need to supplement your income, whatever it is. They give you a snapshot so that you can make those decisions. Another big challenge, so that's topic number 1. Topic number 2 that a lot of them face down here, a little different than in Canada, is health insurance. Healthcare insurance is not cheap. It's very expensive, and depending on your retirement plan and your benefits, you got to come up with a lot of money to cover that. So we have an expert. He's a retired Phoenix police officer. He comes in, he talks, he's going to present on how to navigate that. And then, as I said, a lot of people that, they see that and they're like, okay, I can't afford health insurance and not have a job. So how do I get a job? And some people are like, I've got 2 families. I want to keep going. I've got all this experience. How do I get a job doing what, so I can capitalize on that? Most people that I've seen in policing, they either want to do something that is very similar to what they've been doing as a police officer, or usually as an investigator, or they want nothing to do with it. So we have somebody that comes in and they're professional coaches on how to re-enter the workforce, how to write those resumes, prepare for interviews, all those things. Some people realize, I have to keep working. I just don't want to work for somebody else. So there's an organization down here in the United States called SCORE, which is their nonprofit organization of retired entrepreneurs to help other people start their own small businesses. So SCORE comes in and they're going to talk about, if you want to start your own business, here's some of your resources that are out there as well. And then we have a mental health clinic. The owner of the clinic comes in and he talks about kind of what they provide. And their specialty is first responders. And when I talk about that mental health journey, there's 3 big things that you kind of go through. And I alluded to it earlier, is that the thing that you've been going out the door to do for the last 20, 30 years, when you retire, that's gone. Your mission is taken away. And that's difficult. I think what's even more difficult is that the team that you did that mission with, they left with the mission. So they're not in your life anymore either. So guys struggle with the loss of community. And that's huge for those of us in military, first responders. That community it's important because we're doing stuff that the average citizen doesn't see, the average person doesn't see. And, you use that camaraderie to help you deal with that stuff. And that's gone too. And then the other side of it is the post-traumatic stress. And, I borrowed this from somebody as well. I don't have a lot of original thoughts, just so you know. But imagine you have this great house and it's got a beautiful backyard, but the house next door is a vacant lot. And every morning your dog goes out, he poops in the backyard, and you've got this really cool shovel. And my shovel said Vancouver Police on it. And I would scoop that poop and I'd throw it into the neighbors or into the vacant lot because, hey, it's a vacant lot. I don't have to deal with it. Every day I throw it over the lot. I don't have to worry about it. It's over there, a vacant lot, not a problem. You get ready to retire. Your wife says, hey, just so you know, we bought that vacant lot. We need to get it ready for the kids to move in. Oh, and when you go to clean it, you don't have that shovel anymore. That really cool shovel that said Vancouver Police on it, whatever it says, that's gone too. So now what you've been thrown over the fence for 20 years, you have to deal with. And that's what the post-traumatic stress of a lot of first responders go through, because of the job, the machine's going, right? Kids need to have food on the table. So you just keep going. There's not always that opportunity to stop and take a pause and take a knee and say, okay, I'm dealing with a lot of crap here. I need some help, right? That doesn't always happen. And I think it should, but it doesn't. So you get to the end of your career and all of a sudden you've got to unpack all this stuff. And the ones that don't address it is, they retire and next thing you're sitting at the table, your wife looks at you and says, do you have to chew so loud? Or, your wife says, hey, can you swing by and pick up some bread and eggs at the store? And you're like, do you know who I am? I'm a big deal. I fought bikers. I arrested murder suspects. I had a gun out. I traveled all over. I'm a big deal. I'm Ty Doolittle, gang cop, right? And that doesn't help. That doesn't help because I haven't unpacked that. So with what we want to do, the goal of presenting, serving first responders is that, and I explain it like this, like you're up here, and you're retired, and like, I don't know what my pension looks like. Okay, we're going to help you there. Okay, well, I think I'm not sure how I'm going to provide health coverage because I'm getting older and I have more health problems. Okay, we're going to help you there. I got to work. I don't know how to write a resume. We're going to help you there. I've always wanted to have my own bakery. I always wanted to make dresses, whatever it is. We're going to help you there. The big thing is I've got a lot of stuff that bothers me, and I don't want to lose it. I don't want to lose my wife. I don't want to start drinking, and I'm scared I'm going to become irrelevant. I'm not going to be the leader of my family. I've got all these things that I'm dealing with. Okay, we're going to help you there too. So now that when Karen says, hey, can you get some milk and eggs? I'm like, you're damn right. I'm gonna come up with a plan. I'm gonna locate these eggs and this bread, and I'm gonna get the best, and I'm gonna attack it because now I've got a new purpose. I got a new mission. And one of the things that we encourage with serving first responders is we think your spouses should come with this. They should be in attendance because I tell everybody, although I carried the gun, my wife carried the weight. She carried the weight through death threats, through multiple broken bones, through phone calls saying you got to come to work in the middle of family events. She dealt with all that stuff while building her own career. And, who's going to notice if I'm coming unraveled quicker than anyone? It'll be my wife. It'll be my spouse. She's the one that's going to see it. So we encourage people to come together because, my wife and I, we say retirement should be met with anticipation, not anxiety. And when you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring and you have no game plan, you have no course of action for what you're going to do next, anxiety creeps in, right? And it should be excitement. It should be, man, we're going to do this, and we're going to go travel the world, or I'm going to be the best at smoking brisket or playing golf or pickleball or whatever it is you choose to be your next mission. But, just have something in place. Know that the warning signs are there because, I've known guys who they make it through their career and they get divorced within the first couple of years. I mean, tell me that's not what we did this for, is to go our separate ways. No, we did this so that, our golden years are our golden years. I plan on being around for a lot longer, and I want to make sure that my wife and I have all the tools. And because we've been through it, we want to make sure that the next person is there to get that assistance, because, I used to love the sound of bagpipes. I can't do them anymore. I've been too many of those funerals. It's difficult to get those phone calls.
It is.
And it can be avoided. Mm-hmm. We can do more as a community to help the next guy, because, it's those of us who retire from first responders have a lot to give back. And it should be done in a productive way. This, as you can tell, it does hit home to me, because I look at the guys that I know that have passed away, and like complete legends, right? And I'm talking about guys who made it through their career and they weren't equipped to take that next step. And we just don't want that. My wife and I don't want that. We've got a new mission, and that's to help the next guy.
And that's what I'm very excited about and stuff like that, is because during that transition, there is that loss of purpose, that loss of feeling, the loss of community. And too many will go to the drugs or the booze to try and numb those demons. And that might work in a very short-term thing, but that's not a long-term solution. And you need to build a foundation, whether it's reaching out to the old friends or it's finding these new communities and building strength within that to have the pillars. No, I absolutely commend you and your wife for doing this, and not just doing a retirement, but finding the purpose in you're not technically total retired yet, but that whole thing of, no, I'm still going to serve. I'm just changing the community I'm serving to the one I used to work with. And it's so commendable, and I just can't wait to see that your business keep growing and improving as more people start to find these resources and the word gets out there. So
for sure. When we first got started in this, I've got no training in any of this. I don't know how to build a traditional business. That's totally out of my comfort zone. But growth never happens in a comfort zone. Growth happens when you stretch and you step out of your comfort zone to do the next best thing. And so, we started this as a nonprofit. The last thing we want to do is to have the obstacle of charging people for this. That being said, we also don't want to go broke. So we are a nonprofit. We're learning how to navigate that. It's one thing to navigate how to start up a traditional business, but then to do it as a nonprofit route is even more. So, we're excited to see how this is going to unfold. Somebody had told me, he said, God would not give you the vision without the provision. He says, the provisions are out there. There's more and more people that will support this than you know. You just have to figure out how to relay your message. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to come on your podcast, Brian, is because I know you're going to be reaching more and more people who believe in this type of ministry, if that's what you want to call it. And so, if there's people out there in the Arizona area, in the United States who want to support us, we're all for it. We are just wrapping up our program of being able to have a payment processing system in place, and we'll be accepting donations as well as going after grant money as well, because we want to make sure that we do our best to help those who need the help and take that financial restraint out of it. That being said, you can't do it for free. My wife and I believe in this so much, like we've mortgaged our house to the hilt to make sure that we can cover this. We just can't cover this forever. So, you talk about challenges. How about having a mouth-breathing knuckle-dragger guy like me, figuring out how to write grant proposals and donation requests and going out and meeting with people. One of the things that I really can't stand that really is, through post-traumatic stress is talking in public, going to public meetings where there's a big crowd and I'm not wearing a uniform. That's a lot of stress on me. I'll be quite honest. That's not my comfort zone. It's not what I like to do, but I know that's how I'm going to move this forward. So my wife and I, we do it together. We just spoke at a community event in Avondale, which is one of the suburbs out here. And thank God my wife was there with me, because she helped me get through what is not my comfort zone. The feedback I got is that I look comfortable doing it, but that's through lots of work, lots of hard work to move this forward. The biggest thing is we've partnered with people down here in the Arizona market who have that. They understand what our mission is. They understand our vision. And the biggest thing I told people, like our vendors and people that provide all those services, those 5 services that we talked about, is I said, listen, I don't know how to run your company, nor do I profess to do it. But if we want you to be part of this, but the only caveat is that you have to believe in the mission. The mission is not about growing your business. The mission is about helping the first responder take that next step. And if you can help them, you will receive everything you need. Zig Ziglar says, if you help other people achieve what they want to achieve, you will achieve everything you need. But it's in that order. It's definitely in that order. I'm reading a book right now called High Road Leadership by John Maxwell. The gist of the book is he talks about 3 levels of leadership. There's low road, mid road, and high road. Low road is you do something, you expect to draw, get return without giving anything. That's low road leadership. You just demand results and you're not going to put in. This is middle road leadership is quid pro quo. I expect to be compensated for this much effort, and I'm only going to put that much effort in if I get compensated for that. And high road leadership is you put the effort in because it's the right thing to do. You don't do it for remuneration. You don't do it for payback. You do it because it's the right thing to do. And when you have that type of leadership, you will receive everything you need. And that's straight from Zig Ziglar himself. So that's what we're doing right now is, we believe in giving back, right? We're going to figure out how the funding works. I'm sure of it. I've already, I'm in negotiations with people to help us write grants. And the more people I talk to, the more people they're on board with this. But kind of back to what we said to the people that are part of it, people who are on our nonprofit board, is like this is the mission. It is to help the first responder. And everybody's on board, and we are all rowing in the same direction, and it's just phenomenal. I couldn't have picked better people to work with.
That's awesome, and the passion and everything that you can see from it, like it's going to become a major force of good for those who desperately need it after their years of service. And yeah, I'm excited to see how the business keeps progressing over the years.
Oh, we have. I'm not saying hope because hope is not a strategy. Hope is a town in the middle of British Columbia. But we have our goals, right? We just scheduled our 3 seminars for the summer in June, July, and August. And, our goal is within 6 months, this will be all over the Phoenix area. And within a year, we'll be throughout the state of Arizona. And within 2 to 3 years, we're going to be national. I've had an agency up in Vancouver area said that, on 2025, we want to put you on our schedule. You come up and do this training for us because we believe in it. So, it is moving, and I know this will be a big movement. Do I know exactly how it's going to look? No, but I do know that this is where we're going. And, we have a goal. My wife and I didn't do this because we're looking to make money. If anything, it's costing us money. We did this because it's the right thing to do, and we're gonna make this work.
That's awesome. Can you make sure that you drop the information for everyone so they can find it?
Can I share the screen?
Yes.
So here's our website, Serving First Responders. Yeah, this is our website. We have, and it's still, we're working on what we do, but I just kind of want to go through a little bit about it. And if you need any information, this is where you need to come to get it. But Serving Responders is that we serve those who have served others. That's me back in the day, and we can go through the vision later. But I just kind of wanted to show a little bit about what it is we're doing. These are our seminars, and this is the crux of what we do. This picture, this is actually me and the partner that I was talked about earlier, Iggy. That's not his name, but that's what we're going to call him here. But we cover pension retirement plan options, health insurance plan and options, resume building and assisting in preparation for that next career, assisting in obtaining resources to start your own business, providing resources and information with positive mental wellness as you enter the next mission in life. But big thing is providing community and connection with those who have served. We think that's probably going to be the thing that will move this forward is providing that connection. So you can reach out to us through our website, servingfirstresponders.com, and we'll do. If I can't answer your question, we'll definitely we'll be able to point you in the direction of people who can. And the biggest thing I want to kind of point out here is that if you're having trouble, if you're going through some trouble and you need to talk, call somebody. You're not alone in this. You're not the one that has to deal with this by yourself. There is lots of resources out there. Call 988-lifeline.org. You name it. We have a quick bio on who we are. My wife and I, because we're the ones that are really, we're driving the bus right now. Our goal is that we have this up and running to where we can turn it over to somebody in, 6-7 years. And yeah, we've got a quick list of our providers, so you can read up on who it is that we're working with. But really, stop sharing here. We've got seminars coming up in the Phoenix area starting June 21st, July 25th, April 22nd, or August 22nd. And they're right in the middle of Phoenix at a building there that has been donated to us. So we're excited to take that next step and watch this grow.
Oh, that's absolutely awesome. Thank you very much for what you're doing. And thank you very much for being on the podcast. And I can't wait to reach out to you a little bit later and see how the business is progressing and how much more it's developed and grown. So
I'd love to be back on Smith House Adventures. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, awesome. So thank you again. And this has just been a great honor being able to hear your story.
Cool. Like I say, anybody has any questions, please reach out to us through the website.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you very much. And everyone, thank you for watching, and have yourself a great one. Thanks for your time. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help grow the show. And remember, get back up.